So I know you're getting your checks right now, and let's see. Let's get Cam up here, and Mitch, whenever you're ready, come on out, and we'll get started on this. There's Cam Bertrand right there. There's Mitch Fatel. You guys got beverages, and we'll start with Cam and give you a little break.
Can you refill my coffee, please?
No. Okay. No, but there's probably a server that might do it.
Joking.
That's okay. So I do this interview. Here's the reason. I started doing this a while back. Is because so often when I come off stage after a show, people come up to me and say, why do you fucking do that? And no.
I wouldn't curse.
They come up to me and they say, man, great show. That was so wonderful. And y'all are so funny. And I could never do that. And I go, why do you think you could never do that? And they say to me very often, I wasn't born that way. I'm not hardwired that way. That's not the way I am. So I think there's a thought that we're born this way. That
mentally ill?
Yes, that we're just shot out of the womb this way. And so I think it's good for you guys to find out that comics come from all different walks of life, backgrounds, economic strata, the whole 9 yards. How do you get to be a professional comedian? There's one word: work. You work really hard at it to get to that thing, and you have a passion for it. So Cam, I asked everybody the same question.
Yeah, man.
How did you grow up? You know, where did you grow up? What was your family like? Mom, dad, what they do for a living, brothers, sisters, that sort of thing.
My mom and dad got divorced when I was like young, so I had a single mom, and I had an older brother, older sister. My sister moved out when she was like 13. She went to live with her dad. We had different dads. She went to live in Missouri. So my mom always had like 2-3 jobs, and so it was just me and my older brother. We lived in Tampa most of the time, but we'd move like every other year because my brother would get in trouble. So I've lived in like Baltimore, Alabama, Missouri, Michigan, Texas. I've lived in a bunch of places, but we'd move and then move back because he'd mess up.
He would mess up so bad you had to move to another state?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
And so your mom just had just any job she could get just to keep things afloat.
Yeah, a lot of times she was doing like stuff with houses, like foreclosures and stuff. Like she'd have to do those things.
And so your dad wasn't in the picture at all?
Off and on. So both of them had a hard time living on their own because my dad was a mechanic for over 30 years, and so he'd live on his own for a little while, and then he'd come move back in the house, and they'd split bills so that it was easier, and then they'd start arguing, and then they'd split up again. Yep.
And,
they got an all.
So
not all this is gonna be funny, dog.
No. So do you know this isn't fun? So do you know what's your sister doing now?
My sister's doing great. She's got a great husband. She lives in Missouri, and she has 2 kids, and they're doing wonderful.
So housewife doesn't have a job?
No, she does have a job. I don't know what she does though.
Oh, okay.
That's good. At least you're close.
She's all right.
Yeah.
She's doing great.
Yeah. And your brother?
My brother is currently serving in the penitentiary.
Okay, he followed through.
He gets out next month, baby.
He followed through. All right. And was there anybody in your family, in your dynamic that you grew up with that was a professional entertainer? Did you ever know anybody that was a professional?
No, I didn't know anybody who did anything in entertainment, but I did go to school with a kid who was the funniest person I've ever met in my life.
Oh.
Yeah, his name was Peter Maynard. And we would sit at the lunch table, and he was just so funny. And this is in middle school, and I was like, I want to be that funny all the time. And so I just gravitated towards that. And then I saw Dave Chappelle's Killing Him Softly when I was 14, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to do that, and I want to be Peter Maynard. And so I knew that stand-up was the thing.
By the time you were in middle school?
Yeah, I was 14. I started writing jokes, and then by the time I got to 9th grade, I started doing jokes at the lunch table because I was like, they don't know that I wrote this. Ooh. And then so I did the thing, and I made them laugh, and then that was the start of it. And then when I was 18, 19, I did stand-up for the first time.
Okay. And how old are you now?
25. I turned 26 next month.
No college?
I went to FAMU for 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
It counts. It counts.
It does. It does. Cool. And do you have any hobbies? Is there anything you love to do outside of this? I like to play golf and fitness and that sort of thing. Is it what is there?
Basketball. I love sports in general. I played basketball my whole life, and yeah, I love that. Other than comedy, like I'm a nerd for comedy. It takes up 95% of my time. Like this is all I do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Same.
Were you a fan of mine before you got into comedy?
Hey man, you had a great set tonight. I
Get him
loved
off
it.
the
It was
stage.
great tonight.
I don't want to be on the stage with this punk.
So same basic questions for you.
Okay.
How'd you grow up? Family? Where?
I grew up in a little town called Rockland County, New York.
Hey.
That's my family over there. My mom was a hairdresser. My dad was a financial advisor. I didn't know that there was any show business in my family. I knew when I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a comedian because I used to watch TV, and I thought, I want to be in there.
Really?
You're just gonna one-up me? You're just gonna 14, that's cute.
Yeah, 5, bitch. And
But you specifically knew you wanted to be a comedian, not a singer, not an actor.
no, that's actually a good question. I did not know I wanted to be a comedian precisely. I knew I wanted to be on TV.
Right.
And then somewhere along the line, this is going to age me, I heard Steve Martin, and I thought, if you could get paid to be silly, then that was the way you could make a living, then there'd be no other choice for me.
Got you.
Yeah.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a little sister, yeah.
And what does she do?
She's in the penitentiary. No, I'm joking.
What's her inmate number? I'll give it to my brother. This is,
My sister, she's the smart one in the family. She's a physical therapist, and she's the one that my parents are proud of. And, and she's funnier than me, which I think is ironic.
Oh,
she
cool.
makes me laugh more than anybody in the world.
Gotcha,
So, yeah.
gotcha. And so there wasn't anybody, I think you alluded to this, in your dynamic
Oh, so yeah,
that
no,
was
I did not think that there was anybody because my mom was a hairdresser, my dad was a financial advisor, and they didn't seem. But then I found out that my great-grandfather immigrated here from Russia, and he had a shoe store. And this was a great story for me. And apparently, at the end of the workday, he lived in the Jewish ghetto back in the Bronx or whatever. And apparently, all the other people that were on the block in the stores, they'd come over his store, and he would just tell stories, and they would all laugh. And that was so he was kind of a performer. And I was like, oh, that's who I must get it from. And I make a mean shoe. So there you go. Yeah.
nice. Any hobbies?
That's a really interesting question because most people wouldn't expect this, but my biggest hobby is I love UFC.
Oh,
And I think I love UFC because it's so opposite of what I do. And I've actually, if I can make a plug now,
Sure.
I actually do a podcast with a UFC fighter. His name is Corey Sandhagen. He's the #4 bantamweight. If you go to punchlinespodcast.com, you can listen to our podcast. We interview fighters and comedians, and we talk about the similarities of our because most fighters will say, I don't know how you get up on stage and perform. I could never do that. That frightens me. And most comedians are pussies. And so I always found that fascinating. And he's like, why do you like fighting so much? I said, I think because I would never be able to do it. I'd get too scared.
right.
And so I thought that was an interesting podcast idea.
Cool. Did you go to college?
So I went to NYU and dropped out because I was wasting my dad's money.
Yep.
I knew I was going to be a comedian. I went for film, and the film teacher took me aside, and she's like, you really just want to make people laugh because that's all I would do with my. She's like, you don't belong in this class.
were you there longer than 3 weeks?
What's that?
Were you there longer than 3 weeks?
No, it was a couple months.
Hey, I got you beat, dog.
Yeah.
I dropped out real fast.
And and then I started doing comedy right after I dropped out.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm just, if you can tell a condensed version. The story you told me, we were sitting back there talking last night about working for David Brenner's show early on.
Right.
You were still a student,
Yeah.
and how you had to sneak in.
Yeah, and you made me actually feel better about it. I was being David Brenner, of course. Everybody here knows who he is. You probably know. David Brenner had a TV show, Nightlife. That's what it was called.
Nightlife.
Does anybody remember David Brenner had a TV show called Nightlife? So I was an intern on that show, and the first day they told me you're not allowed to talk to Dave. Don't talk to Dave. And they used to do an opening, and I thought, I can write for the show. I'm so funny, and the writers suck. So, but you weren't allowed to talk to Dave. So one day I went in very early, and I hid behind his dressing room. And when he came in, I knocked on his door, and I was like, I'm about to either get fired or make a good story. And he opened the door, and he was really kind to me. He's like, what are you doing here? I said, because you're not allowed to go and knock on the host's door. And I said, I wrote a skit for the show, and I hope you like it. And the next day, he told me it was great, but he couldn't use it for his show. And then about 4 days later, I was watching TV, and they did my skit and never gave me credit. And
Wow.
Now tell him why.
But Les made me feel better about it, because he said, because what I realized was there's a writers guild, and you're not allowed to take, there's a writers union. You're not allowed to take somebody's material that's not in the writers guild. But David thought, like, well, I'll take it and put it on. And I should have probably thought, well, that's pretty cool. It shows that I can write. But I was all upset. But you made me feel better, because what did
John Mendoza, who's a great comedian out of New York. When I was a young comic just getting started, he was the headliner, and I was working with him, and I knew he wrote for Letterman. And I said, and I was sitting there with my loose leaf notebook and my hen scratching. And I said, how do you get to write for Letterman? He goes, first you got to type that shit up. That would be a good presentation. He said, no. He said, what I did was I had an in with a writer. I knew one of the writers, and I would give him my stuff, and he would submit it through his name, and I would watch every night to see if they took any of it. And he would tell him, the writer told him it was coming from a comic named John Mendoza. Yeah. But he goes, I was seeing if they would steal it, if they would. And he goes, sure enough, they did. And then after they stole about, several bits, then they finally called him and said, hey, man, we want to hire you. We've tried several years. So it kind of works that way.
His point was I should steal from John Mendoza.
Yeah.
I don't really think that makes any sense in my case, but whatever.
You can bring up the house lights just a touch, and if you have any questions at all for any of the three of us, we'd be happy to take them. We're looking around. Yeah, right here.
Yeah. Oh, Mom.
Thank you. But now you've been here more than 3 times. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
so
this will be the last time I'm ever here. So. Well, thank you. Really. That
career's
means a lot
taken
to
off.
me. It's really nice to hear. Thank you.
Mitch definitely has one of the most unique deliveries. Just the way he says things.
I call it mentally ill.
It's good. Anything else out here? Any questions? Over here? Yes, go ahead.
Oh my gosh. So I've been following your career for a long time. I'm sure you've seen me at a lot of your shows.
Stalker.
So now that you're married and you have a family, and
We can go to an orgy if you want. My wife likes those.
She's open to it.
I've noticed the different, genre and I got all your stuff on iPod.
Right. Right.
So what is going to be like your thing now?
Well, that's actually a great.
Be like dad thing?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Sexual thing.
Well, I think it's kind of a mix now, right? Like it's kind of in between. I told my wife, there's 2 things that I'm really proud of. When I got married and I had a baby, I told my wife before I got married, I said, hey, if it's cool with you, I'm not going to wear my ring on stage because I've never been a married guy on stage and I don't feel like comfortable being that guy. Because if you listen to my older CDs, they're available for sale, $5. If you listen to my older CDs, I used to just talk about how I was single and loved girls and stuff. And my wife was very cool. She's like, when we got married, she's like, listen, you do what you do. This is your career. This is what you've been doing for the last 20 years. And then all of a sudden I thought to myself, there's only one thing in life that I hate, and that's a phony. So I've always hated phonies, and I always felt, and all of a sudden I thought, well, if I go on stage without my ring and make believe that I'm someone that I'm not anymore, then I'm a phony, and I would be really embarrassed of that. So I said, well, I either can write an act about being married and having a baby, and if I can't write an act about that, then I probably was never meant to be a stand-up comedian, because you should be able to evolve with what you do. So I decided to embrace that and change my act, and hopefully it's working good. Hopefully people like it. So
Yeah. You still work that sex perv stuff in there
well,
so
that's
well.
the part of me. I can never get rid of
Oh,
that.
you're excellent at it.
Yeah. That's
Another question? Yeah, over here. How long was she down with the action with the C-section?
Was it what?
How long was she down for action with the C-section? How long did you have to
The
wait?
next day, my wife is a whore. She, my wife is, and she would say it, and she'd laugh. I have bad girl shirts available too, and
Did you tell him that?
yeah, I did. Tell
Okay.
her. Yeah, my wife was. She's just. The reason I was able to marry her is I finally found someone that was kind of a female version of me, and she can kind of. She just puts me to shame. So she's crazy good at everything. So.
Nice. Is that it? Back there? Yes. Okay. Who's your influence?
I have a lot of influences. You say, oh yeah, besides Pete, Dave Chappelle's the greatest comedian of all time. Like, yeah, you just want my top 5? Would that make sense? That'd be easier. Dave Chappelle, Patrice O'Neal, Bill Burr, Gerard Carmichael, Louis C.K.
I never heard of these guys. Really?
Really? They're Brazil. They're
no,
Brazilian.
yeah.
Brazilian. Another question? Yeah, right here.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's all different kind of like age groups there, and you guys really know your craft. When it's not going right, you're not hitting it, it's not working.
So this question's for me. It was like, hey, Cam, when you're bombing, what do you think of?
It might be mine. Go ahead. There you go.
What do you say to yourself, like when you go back, when the show's all over, you go home, how do you keep going the next day? What do you say to yourself to believe in yourself?
Who's taking this first?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Now I feel bad. I'm like, who's going to do this? You got to trust what you talk about. You have to love the things that you're saying and hope that other people agree. You know what I mean? Like, I know that I have a younger outlook on some things, and I just hope that I can say it in a way to where you all can laugh at it too, because I know some of the things I talk about aren't relatable to everybody. So when you have a set that's not the best, you just go, I didn't connect with them. Like, it's always your fault for not relaying it the right way. Because if you think it's funny, somebody else thinks it's funny. You just have to show them why it's funny.
Yeah, for me, I just feel like I got to work harder.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we all know that, and we've all been doing it. I mean, Cam's been doing it a pretty long time, but we've been doing it a very long time. And no matter how, we all know that you can get that audience sometimes. I mean, you can have 1,000 great shows and just get to that point where you think you're bulletproof. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you can get that crowd where it's like you really feel like they don't speak English. I mean, literally. You just don't connect with them. But I think Cam said it. You can't blame the crowd. Right. They came to see it. They're there.
They gave you a chance.
But sometimes you just don't connect with them, and you just have to do the best you can, and you just hope it doesn't happen much. You know what I mean? If it happens like over and over and over again, then you're not really a comedian. You're a
poet.
Yeah, a poet. A poet. Yes, you're a storyteller.
There's some poets in here like, what?
Yeah.
I think for me, honestly, I think the reason why I'm a successful comedian is I didn't give myself a plan B because I dropped out of school because I think I bombed so much in the beginning that if I had a plan B, I would have taken it. I just realized, like, I have nothing else to do at this point, and my dad is not paying for me to go back to school.
Right.
So there were a couple of nights where I'd go home after performing, and I would literally lay in the fetal position and moan. It hurt so much because I did so bad, and I would go like, well, I got nothing else to do but go back on stage again. And I think a lot of times almost comedians need that because it's such a brutal job. In the beginning, it's so hellish that I think if you have a plan B, you usually will take it because it gets like Dave Fatel is a good friend of mine, and he died for 3 years straight to the point where we took him aside and said, maybe you're not a comedian. And Dave Fatel is playing theaters. So,
yeah. And I think many of us have, I think it's a protective, we have a false sense of self when we start. We think we're better than we are. Yeah. We do. We do a set and you get just a few laughs. and it's not really a good set, but just that few laughs went, okay,
Yeah.
I got a few laughs, and I'm on the right track.
But it's like fight mentality. Like, even if you lose a fight, you're like, I got some licks in. You're like, I hit him
Right.
a couple times. Like,
Right.
even if everybody's like, oh, you lost that fight, you'd be like, but I did kind of good, though.
You know,
like, you have to.
Speaking of fighting, I have a UFC podcast. It's
That's right. I know you do.
podcast.com.
But you have a passion for it, and you're not going to give up until they make you give up. You know, I think that's
Until
a big
people start
part of
giving
it.
you work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Is that it? Right there. You got 2 more. Right there.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you very
Okay.
much. I appreciate
Over
that.
here.
Thank you.
Question?
Do you guys have an instinct when you walk on stage and look at the crowd? Do you have an instinct looking over and saying, I think this is a good crowd, or I think this is a bad crowd?
I don't.
I think, for me personally, within the first minute.
Yeah.
Because you'll start and you can feel already an energy that so you're like, okay, this is going to be work. And usually that instinct is right. Like when you're like, this is going to be work. And I've learned when it's one of those shows, if anyone ever sees me again, if I'm just staring at the light and I never look down, I'm just counting the time until I have to finish. If I'm looking at the audience, that means I'm enjoying it. So.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan B if you think you're not hitting the mark? Do you alter your act?
No, I don't. I mean, no, I don't. I stick to what I write, and I figure, like Cam was saying, they either come to me or they don't. And I'm at the point now where I've been doing it enough that it won't affect me more than 5 minutes after the show. But if it's,
And this is something that I teach when I teach comedy, is that being around it for 40 years, to me, there's 2 kinds of comedians. There's crowd pleasers and there's celebrities. True. Okay? I'm a crowd pleaser. So I am the one that's going to walk up, do some stuff, fill out the audience, see where their heads are at, and kind of go that way. I've got enough material. I can go clean. I can go dirty. You just kind of do. I'm a crowd pleaser. Crowd pleasers don't get to be celebrities because you can't be branded. It's a lot tougher to be a celebrity because a celebrity comedian has to stick to his guns. He has a point of view, he has a certain character, and he has to decide, this is it, and I'm not going to vary from it. Which means Mitch will get an audience that he gets up, does his first 5 minutes, and goes, they're not into my shit. That means they ain't going to be into his shit for 50 fucking minutes.
Yep.
and I've been
And
there
that takes big cojones to stand there and do that. But you have to do that to be a celebrity because you have to be able to be branded. And that's the difference there,
Yeah, it depends. Like, so I know being young and being pretty well unknown, it's like I have to, and being young and wearing a hat on stage, like I understand, like it's a youth thing of like, I have to let you all know, like, I don't think I'm cool. Here's these things. Like, if I would have opened with the Big Dick Jimmy story, you guys would have been like, this guy's weird. But I have to give you something to where you're like, oh, like he's younger. So I'll switch up depending upon like what the vibe is. Like, because if I just do jokes that are just for me, it doesn't come off nice. Like, it comes off real young, cool kid. Does that make sense?
You are not cool, dude.
You're still trying to find yourself. We know that.
Yeah, I mean,
but you're still in the midst of that. You're in the beginning.
But if I just come up and I just do the jokes that I want to do, I'm going to bomb 90% of the nights. Like, most of the people that come to shows aren't my age. We're broke. Like, we don't have money. So it's like the people who come to shows, they don't want to hear things where I'm like, I went to a Tyga concert. You guys are going to be like, ugh. We paid for this? How long is this guy on stage? Like, you know what I mean?
That's a good point. I didn't realize that. Yeah, people your age usually wouldn't have the money to come out
Exactly.
to shows.
So I'm doing jokes to people that are older than me
that's interesting.
all the time.
Huh.
Nice. One more? Yep, over there. No, well, I think that most of our stuff, knowing these guys, it comes from real life, but it's a bastardization of it.
I think
because we take the stories, but what's the number one thing? Is it funny? okay?
right.
So when I'm teaching my class, lots of times I'll get a new comic gets up, and they're just the first time out of the shoot, and they give us a story, right? And they go, and then we take that, and then as a class, we start giving them feedback. Well, you know what? Maybe if you were at a gas station instead of a convenience store, maybe if you were at the circus instead of the carnival, maybe if you said it this way, maybe if this character was this kind of character instead of that, it would be funnier. And then the new person on stage would go, but that wasn't how it happened.
Right.
And we go, no one gives a fuck how it happened.
Yeah.
How do you make it funny? And that's the important thing. So I think that the foundation of a lot of our stuff, and there are some things that I think we all do that are verbatim
Exactly
something
how it
that happened,
Yeah.
that you just happen to see. But it's about funny. That's what we're all looking for.
Yeah, I'd
is
say
crafting that laugh.
95% at worst is that's all the stuff is real. Jimmy's a real person. Big Nate is a real person. Like these are all I'm using their real names.
You could be sued.
I could be said.
You
Big
have no
Nate
money,
is
though.
in prison right now.
Oh, okay.
Who's getting? If he couldn't get a good lawyer for himself, he's not going to get a better lawyer to get me.
Cam Bertrand shanked 2 years from now.
That could happen.
Yeah, I think that we definitely take the subjects and we elaborate and maybe add in a fact or two. And when I first started dating my wife, she's like, "That's not what really happened, that story." And I said, but when you see a magician, you don't really think that they're cutting the woman in half. You know that there's kind of a, that that's not real, but you still think it's entertaining. And so I said to my wife to shut up because I pay the mortgage. To not tell people that it's not real.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Cam Bertrand, Mitch Fatel. Thank you.